for his role in the not only in the killing of Israeli assets, but I think in the death of 2 Israeli soldiers. But he was exchanged while he was in prison. This is a man who, you can just tell that he became a leader in prison of the Palestinians and Hamas. So even from prison, he became a leader through the example that he set. Very educated, wrote a book, The Thorn in the Carnation, about his experience as an autobiographical work of fiction. But he also learned about the Israelis, learned about their mind, learned to read Hebrew, think like his enemy. When he was released in a prisoner exchange in 2011, he immediately rose up in the ranks and again became a dominant figure. But he always said that he was marked for death. I mean, that's the thing the Israelis don't understand. When people like Yahya Sinwar and people like Hassan Nasrallah understand the Israelis want to kill them. So you don't create an organization that collapses like a house of cards if you die. You are a product of an organization that is built upon an ideology that is premised on the Palestinian statehood, a notion that resides in the hearts and the minds of every Palestinian. You happen to be at the top of it, but when you get eliminated, that's just a body dying. That doesn't mean the end of the cause that you're serving. In fact, by killing Sinwar the way they did, and by foolishly sharing the video of his final moments to the world, they just solidified the notion of a man who wasn't down hiding in a tunnel surrounded by women and children and hostages. He was on the streets fighting. According to Hamas, he was on the streets for 18 days prior to this moment, leading the fight. Here he is. His compatriots are dead, killed by multiple tank rounds in this building, anti-tank guided missile rounds, etc. This man is probably fatally wounded, meaning I don't know if he could have recovered from these injuries. They're very severe. An arm that would have to be amputated, a leg that would have to be amputated, internal injuries. And yet he can stare down this and see he picks up a stick with his last strength. You don't have no idea how much effort this took. This is a broken body, a man who's dying, and yet in his last moments stares down the drone, stares at the Israelis, and then throws a stick at it to try and knock it down. I mean, he just solidified himself as the king of resistors. You don't have to agree with the guy. You can call him a terrorist. That's bad imagery for the Israelis, because he is now a martyr. Every kid that is raised, every children of the camp, just like him, are raised up. Now they're going to see this and they're going to say, that's me. That's my future. Because, they're not going to live in a camp forever as prisoners. That day is over. That's what October 7th solidified. The Palestinians that are there will not be prisoners forever. This resistance will last forever. As long as the Israelis try to occupy, Hamas will resist. And this will be Israel's future. And Israel can't survive this, cannot sustain this. The Palestinians shouldn't have to sustain this, but they've been prisoners since 1948. So the idea that the Palestinians are suddenly going to break and collapse, no, this is their moment. This is the moment. This is the put up or shut up time. Do you want a Palestinian state? Because you have crossed the line of departure. There's no going back. You either complete the task, get your state, or you're finished. And I think Sinwar's death has showed that they're not going to quit. They're not going to back down. That this is an existential fight between them and the Israeli occupiers.
If you own a home in Westchester County or upstate New York, you could get the latest solar panels installed at no cost. Now, I'm not saying this is free, so let me explain. The federal government recently extended the Energy Policy Act, which gives...
Yesterday, I talked with Colonel Jackbo about his point of view on this assassination of political and military leaders of Hezbollah, Hamas. He said that the British intelligence had every information about the Irish commanders. When he asked them what's the reason that you don't go and kill them? Do you have everything about them? He said, why should we do that? Because we have everything. If we kill them, we just destroy our information. It's against us, not against them. But it doesn't seem that the Israelis are thinking the same way that the British intelligence were thinking those days. I don't know if they're thinking this way right now. But when you destroy everything you gather through intelligence or everything about Yahya Sinwar, for example, for instance, the leader of Hassan Nasrallah, what's the mindset, in your opinion, by this attitude on their part, Israelis?
Well, also remember that it wasn't just about the British being able to gather intelligence about the Irish and the IRA. It was making sure that there's people that they could negotiate a end of conflict with. If it weren't for Gerry Adams and other Irish Republican leaders, there wouldn't have been a peace. The Brits had to sit down with people that they knew, people that knew them, people that they had a relationship. It might have been a bad relationship, but it was a relationship nonetheless. Because you have to start with some sort of foundation if you're ever going to have a negotiated. So the Israelis are not interested in a negotiated settlement. The Israelis aren't interested in maintaining connectivity with Hamas leadership or Hezbollah leadership so that they can find a peaceful way out of this. The Israelis are interested in greater Israel. At least the current manifestation of the Israeli government has said that's what they're shooting for. I don't know. Are Americans listening to what's coming out of Israel, listening to what Israeli policymakers are saying about Gaza, about how they're going to go in and build new real estate? Israel's taking it over. The Palestinians are done. The kind of language about human animals and things of this nature. I mean, if you view the Palestinians as human animals, why would you care about who human animals can't do? And this is the kind of stupidity that's taken over Israel, because at one time the Israelis were capable of, having complicated, realistic thought. I know this because I worked with them to get that way. In 1991, at the end of the first Gulf War, the Israelis made a decision that the greatest threat to them was Iraq, Saddam Hussein, because he had fired 48 missiles into their country, and they believed he was keeping missiles, or he had the potential to reconstitute missiles with chemical weapons, and Israel could not accept that. So from 1991 to 1993, they practiced to assassinate Saddam, who they viewed as an irrational character who had to be removed. And they actually came very close to assassinating him. They had his uncle Kharala had died. There was going to be a funeral in the fall of 1993. Or 1992, 1993, I think 92 perhaps. And the Israelis had actually sent commando teams into Iraq to reconnaissance this place. They had the whole assassination lined up. They did their last second rehearsal before the troops went off to kill Saddam, and a mistake happened. They fired a live rocket when they should have not, and they killed some soldiers, and it got bad press. And suddenly, you couldn't assassinate Saddam anymore. But this opened a window where the Israelis were like, well, what do we do? And so enter me and some others, and we came in and said, hey, why don't you work with us to eliminate the threat of weapons of mass destruction, and buy into the notion that Iraq can be contained if it doesn't have weapons of mass destruction, that Saddam can be part of the family of nations as long as he can't threaten you with weapons of mass destruction. This required Israel to go through a very major rethink. I worked with the colonel whose job was to be Saddam Hussein, and spent hours talking to him about the reality of the Iraqi regime, how it functioned. He knew a lot. I knew a lot. We just started working. And then they started to see how the Iraqis were responding to the inspections, and the notion that Iraq could be disarmed was raised. And the Israelis changed their position. By 1998, when I left, they had decided that Iraq could be disarmed, and that if Iraq was disarmed, that Iraq no longer posed a threat. They also changed their mind about Saddam Hussein, saying he's a rational actor, and as long as he can be engaged economically, et cetera, he's not going to embark on suicidal policies of continuing to attack Israel. Then in 1998, the United States put pressure on Israel to join the regime change thing, and the old thinkers came back and said, well, let's get rid of Saddam. And so they redid everything. So all the hard work, which was intelligence-based, fact-based, that we had worked upon, was flushed down the toilet. Amos Gilad came in. He was their new intelligence chief, and he just allowed, basically, it created the notion that they could cherry pick intelligence, they could manufacture intelligence, they could do anything. It wasn't the quality of the information, but rather the result that mattered, that they would, as George W. Bush and Tony Blair agreed, they would fix the intelligence around the goal. So if the goal is to get rid of Saddam and blame him about weapons of mass destruction, they would create the intelligence that supported that picture, as opposed to letting the intelligence, determine the policy based upon reality. So Israel, this is 1998, and it only got worse since then. Amos Gilad and Netanyahu, rose up together. He's been advisor of Netanyahu for some time now. We're at the point right now where, the decisions being made by the Israeli government are about sustaining political objectives, as opposed to, making sure political objectives are shaped by reality. Could you negotiate with Hamas? Yes. Could you negotiate with Hezbollah? Yes. But only to what end? Does Israel, for Israel to withdraw from the Sheba Farms, which is Hezbollah considers to be part of Lebanon, they would have to give up control of the springs and the source of water for the Jordan River, which they're not going to do. So they're there because they want to control the water that breathes life into Israel. In order for there to be a Palestinian state, they need to give the Palestinians political autonomy, and land. They're not going to give them land. We see the ongoing theft of the land in West Bank, and now we have them talking about stealing Gaza. Political autonomy, the whole reason why Hamas was created was to create a divide within the Palestinian community, so that it would be forever divided, and the Israelis could play off that divide. So now you have a situation after October 7th where Hamas has emerged as the most dominant political force because of their ongoing resistance. The Israelis, they don't respect that. They've personalized this. They personified Hamas in the form of one man, Sinwar, and now they've killed him. And they somehow believe that this will cause the Palestinian people to collapse. All it's done is ensure that the Palestinians will be less likely to engage in kind of